I'm Ken Matthews, and here's my latest podcast. No commercials, no censorship, no corporate media narratives. And another great guest today, Sam Faddis, retired CIA operations officer, served in the Near East and South Asia, author, commentator, senior editor of And magazine, and a public speaker. And it's great to have you back on the show, sir. We need to start figuring out what's happening in this country, and I can't keep track of it anymore.
It's a challenge. Thanks for having me, by the way. Appreciate it. Been too long.
My pleasure. So let's get right to it. Will we ever get rid of the CIA?
Well, I don't
I
think
know that's a heavy question, but
no, it's my hesitation is because will we ever be in a world where we don't need an outfit like the CIA doing what the CIA is supposed to do
that's the key.
abroad,
Hmm.
constitutionally and pursuant to U.S. law? I don't see such a reality. The fact is, you need somebody crawling around overseas telling you about the plots and occasionally when the president gives you the appropriate authorities carrying out covert action. Uh, is the CIA currently broken and in drastic need of reform or replacement? Absolutely. So, in other words, my hesitation is not to suggest that there's nothing wrong with the agency and we don't need to fix it. Very much
Oh,
to the
understood.
contrary.
So you're saying we need elements in the CIA. We need a central intelligence agency to somehow, and this is where many of us, especially America Firsters and truth tellers like us, uh, this is where we're getting confused now because I'm seeing this encroachment just as everybody from Eisenhower to Truman to Kennedy had spoken of historically, that if you have these entities like the NSA, the CIA, the DHS, and the FBI, I think that's, to me, that's overkill. It's kind of overkill because now you can track my comment about the Ukraine on Facebook, but you can't tell me when there's going to be an attack overseas. What's happening there?
Yeah, well, I think you put your finger on something really important, which is you got a bunch of guys and gals doing stuff they should not do. And should is a kind word that legally they cannot do.
And you're talking about people in the agencies.
Talk about people in the agencies. In other words, you got
Okay.
senior people, top people like John Brennan in the CIA
Mm.
involved in, what I've called repeatedly an attempted coup against Donald Trump.
Hmm.
And yet at the same time, your collection downrange overseas. What's the next terrorist plot that's going to hit the United States? Is Putin we can see half the Russian armies lined up on the border with Ukraine. I'm going back years now. Okay, that doesn't tell us whether Putin's bluffing or getting ready to go tomorrow morning. Where's the asset that's sitting right next, our source next to Putin, that talked to him last night that can tell you, no, he's not kidding around, man. This is not a bluff. This is not a threat. At 05 tomorrow morning, the tank engines start and they're coming. In other words, you need this kind of critical, hard, really important stuff that gives our commander in chief that critical advantage. And all too often we are not getting it. And yet we got guys, trying to decide, who have decided that they believe they have the authority to decide who gets to be president of the United States. So they're doing all stuff that should not be done
Hmm.
and not doing the stuff that actually is their job. So fixing that, yeah, that's the essence of it, and that's a tall order, man.
One of the scariest things for me, and I've been censored and deplatformed, and every other week I'm getting a community violation thing for saying what,
Right.
and then I'm searching through YouTube and I see 19-year-old girls doing things that would have traumatized me 40 years ago on YouTube. But if you go on YouTube and bring up Ukraine or Israel or Epstein, it's like, woo, unless, as you agree with the narrative. And that's the other thing I want to talk to you about. I don't like the fact that these agencies are all involved with the media and social media and this whole concept. And it's even going on now in the White House. we need to get involved in these platforms and make sure that Ken and Sam are saying the appropriate things or zap them out of there.
Yeah, well, look, this goes to the heart of one of the core pillars of the whole republic, right? Freedom of speech. What the founding fathers believed in was the marketplace of ideas, right? And by the way, they were not shy, right? These guys, half their meetings were in taverns, so these guys were not bookworms. And in other words, they would shout each other down, and they were pretty vigorous when they debated things. And what they believed in was let let people talk and let people debate things, and then the truth will out. And as soon as you go down that road to the government deciding can be what idea you can espouse, you're lost. You're done. You can't have that kind of policing of ideas. Um, Really, really dangerous, because once you start down that slope, you're done, in my estimation. You have killed freedom of speech.
It's interesting because people are always talking. This started, minutes after he came down the escalator in 2015. Bombastic, says crazy things, offensive language. But anybody who's read American history, that's exactly what our founding fathers were. These men were not. Some of them were refined, but some of them still had muskets. They would take a musket to the meeting in case the wrong people showed up to take over the colonies. They were very bombastic and rude, and they had this ability to shake hands like men do, but we don't shake hands anymore because of COVID, Sam. Don't do it. But this really bothers me, and I don't know how to stop it because MAGA came in and it brought a wave, in my opinion, and I voted and elected Trump 3 times in a row. I am worried that we have this false sense of something, that everything's going to be okay because MAGA's in town, but I don't think there's enough Trumpers in D.C. I think there's so many people trying to stab him in the back that I see censorship getting worse. I'm worried about AI and the money that we're spending on it.
Yeah, look, I think one of the big issues that we face, folks who think generally like us, right,
Mm-hmm.
is exactly what you just talked about. Right? We've fought like hell. Now Trump's back in the White House, and a whole bunch of people think, well, we won. It's all good. I can go back to the couch, open another bag of Cheetos, and put the game on because I don't. It's all good. And you're like, man, there is a knife fight on an epic level going on in D.C. Let's talk about CIA just as an example, just because I'm closest to it. But
Mm-hmm.
all right, well, you have Trump's guy in charge of CIA, Radcliffe. Okay, and he brought in a deputy, neither one of whom, by the way, is an intelligence officer by trade, both lawyers. That's not me
Uh-oh.
knocking them. That's just to say we got two guys from completely outside that outfit who came in to take over. Now, I mean, anybody who thinks that because of that, you have transformed the agency, weeded out all the issues, that it's all better now, is on drugs. I mean, that's just forget it. You know, that is that's like a toehold. This is like people always use these D-Day analogies. We hit the beach, man. Okay, well, you remember what happened when they hit the beach at Omaha Beach?
It was
They
bad.
were lying in the surf, surrounded by dead bodies for a long time. And a lot of amphibious landings, by the way, never got past that stage. They ended up as disasters. Well, we're somewhere in those first couple of hours on Omaha Beach, and the result is not guaranteed. So, uh, at the agency, again, to use CIA as an example only, okay, you got to fire a bunch more senior people at CIA. And Ratcliffe has to be surrounded by folks who know, not just are loyal, but know the place.
Mm.
Otherwise, the intrigue will eat you alive. You will, and that is true at the Bureau, NSA, every place else throughout the agency. And are they? They are fighting tooth and nail to prevent Trump's appointees from making real change. Why? Because what is the plan? The plan is dig in, wait this out, and then there will be another election and hope they get their guy in and everything goes back to exactly the way it was. We have not won this war at all. Um, and it is hard. It bothers me driving around Pennsylvania because when I'm talking to people, you can feel this sense of, yeah, I worked really hard for the last X number of years, and
Hmm.
it's good to know that we won.
Yep.
Like it's all over now. You're like, no, man, it ain't
Who's,
over.
who's the guy that wrote the Art of War again?
Sun Tzu.
Yeah, I always mispronounce his name. But anyway, he talks about this at length about this getting your enemy to be complacent,
Yep.
getting your enemy to start celebrating before there's a victory. And
Yep.
then while they're celebrating, you show up at the tavern and take them out. I mean, that's how guerrilla warfare started with the colonies. The Brits would be, we won that war. No, you didn't. There's still 45 of us in the woods. You can't see us because we're not wearing red. This is what concerns me. These investigations, I want to move on to the investigations because they're such delicious headlines. They're those meme headlines and the high five headlines, and they get a lot of likes. Brennan question, Hillary being brought in, Obama exposed. So I look at Brennan, Schiff, Obama, Comey, Hillary. I mean, isn't this theater? I mean, aren't they untouchable? How do you even if you didn't get them in while the crime was happening, and the evidence has been out there for how long, Sam? How long have we known about these knuckleheads and the other 50 that were railroading this country for the last 10 years?
Yeah, so let me be precise in my response, right? Because the real skeleton in my closet is not that I was in the agency, it's that I'm also a lawyer. So that I
So you don't
I
want to get sued or assassinated.
no, I want to just make sure that nobody misunderstands what I'm saying.
Got it.
I go with the Clooney response on assassination. I know all the guys they would send after me, and they like me better than them, so I'm not worried. Um, they might drop by and have a beer, but that's the way that would work.
Good.
Look, do I think Brennan's untouchable? I don't. Do
Oh,
I
that's
think
good.
all these guys are untouchable? No. But if you're going to bring down a mafia don, to use an analogy, good intentions and wishes don't count for a damn thing, right? If you're going to convict the mafia don for ordering a hit, again, I'm using this as an analogy, anybody listening, then what you really need in the end for a successful prosecution is somebody that was in the room when that order was given, who flips and goes state's evidence, who decides it's time to roll. General accusations, the idea that in generality what they did, everybody knows, that won't count for anything. When you want to prosecute John Brennan, he's going to show up not out of his own pocket, but out of the pockets of people that are going to help him. And he's going to hire the highest priced legal counsel in the country. And they're going to show up, and these guys may be completely amoral scumbags, but they know their business inside a courtroom. So you better bring your A game. So what does it come down to? It comes down to getting somebody to roll, ideally more than somebody. Do I think that's possible? I do. None of this should be misinterpreted as I think it's easy, the exact opposite. But the reason I think it's possible is because if you were a guy inside CIA who was in some of these meetings, a mid-level individual, the chances you were going to come forward as a whistleblower to talk about that, as long as Joe Biden was sitting in the White House, are pretty close to zero, unless you're suicidal, because they're not going to protect you. Whistleblower protections mean nothing. The inspector generals don't do their job. All I'm doing is giving you my head on a platter. Now that you have Donald Trump there, somebody who had misgivings all along, who was afraid to do the right thing, might come forward. Again, does that mean I think it's easy? No. But what I'm saying is I'm not ruling it out. I'm not. I think there has been that substantive change, but They better have some very serious boys and girls on this prosecution team,
Mm.
like hard-nosed prosecutorial people that have worked things like mafia cases, because otherwise they're going to get fed into a wood chipper. Yeah, that's.
Is Attorney General Pam Bondi the right person for the job right now, in your opinion?
I think she's fine. Do I think Pam Bondi is the person who ought to be trying the case in the courtroom? No. But the point is, she's not going to be the one in the courtroom unless you're crazy. I mean, that's not an attack on her personally. The attorney general should not be the person standing there. What they need to do is find within the Department of Justice those hard-nosed prosecutors who have worked things like cartel cases, mafia cases, and know how to, okay, it's a very secretive, tightly knit organization. How do we take it apart piece by piece? That's what it's going to take, not wishes.
Can the president choose a special prosecutor? Is that the chain of command? How do you get special prosecutors in? How can our side find the best, most hard-hitting, badass people?
I believe, and I'm not the expert on this, that it's the attorney general,
So it
the
would be
chief,
Pam Bondi. Okay.
that it would be Pam Bondi. But and it also comes down to, obviously, this is a team effort. You're talking about a huge amount of evidence. You're talking over years of time, transcripts, interviews, yada, yada, right? So it's not like a person. You need the right special prosecutor, and then that special prosecutor needs to have the right people to put on the field who are actually going to do the litigation in court. And
So we
again,
have these. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, I mean, look, once upon a time when I was a JAG officer in the Army, I did defense work. Okay. One of the reasons I stopped doing defense work as a lawyer is because I was tired of the ethical baggage. Why? Because I won cases where my client was guilty as hell of some heinous things, and the prosecutor didn't do his job, and the guy walked. In other words, he walked because I did my job as a defense counsel, and the prosecutor phoned it in that day. And I wasn't going to keep going. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life carrying that ethical baggage. Somebody's got to do it. It's important. Wasn't going to be me. So you got a prosecutor who's not up to snuff, justice will not be done. People who are guilty as hell will walk out the door. So again, Pam Bondi needs to find the team that can do this.
Adam Schiff, more revelations now. We all knew. Again, it was one of those things where you said a moment ago, everybody kind of knew because it was leaked out. It was leaked out online. It was leaked out with a handful of truth tellers. The media did a great job protecting all these people, including Biden. Now we have a whistleblower. Now we have people from, I guess, in the FBI that have come up front and went on record supposedly with Kash Patel and the DOJ that Schiff did a lot of the things that would put him in jail. What's your take on that? Is that just going to be something that'll be drawn out for the next 4 years?
Again, there are prosecutable offenses here that should be prosecuted. Complicated by Schiff's status as then a congressman and now what, a senator, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Without question. I mean, that will complicate it. Does it prevent you from prosecuting him? It does not, because we're not talking, about actions that are really in the scope of his duties as a representative. These are not comments on the floor. I mean, a representative doesn't get a check that says do anything you want anywhere, anytime, because you're in Congress. It may seem like that, but they don't actually legally have that. By the way, I would say this. I had dug into this in some detail yesterday, trying to catch up on the story. I was aware of the story, but okay, let's get down in the weeds. Everything that whistleblower says to me rings completely true. By that, I mean exactly the way this worked, that Schiff would have these discussions, that his team was aware of what was going on. He would identify specific information and then have a particular person, on his staff leak it to a particular contact, presumably because what made sense, like this media outlet will be most appropriate for us to leak this story to. That sounds exactly right to me. Right? I was even watching some of this on television last night with my wife, who's also a retired agency officer, and we kept looking at each other and saying, That's exactly the way that works. That's exactly the way people do that. I mean, if this whistleblower is making this up, he's doing a really good job because it all sounds exactly right. I mean,
So,
right in the sense of that's how you actually do that kind of thing.
just as an aside, I forgot your wife was also CIA, right? So
Yes.
how do those conversations go? Do you have like a lie detector in your home, or can you read each other? I mean,
Well, I don't lie to my wife because that would be death. I not that stupid. I, uh, no, look, we've been in this world for a really long time. I will say, that to this day, especially because I am so vocal, uh, we assume that we are monitored all the time.
yeah,
So
isn't that crazy?
if I say to my wife, "Hey, you want to take a walk?" She knows that means let's go have a talk,
Exactly.
and we leave the cell phones inside and we walk out across our property in the mountains carrying no electronics.
Hmm.
Uh, and uh, and even then probably are slightly circumspect about what we talk about, but we just assume that there is always somebody listening, and
I remember
which is a sad commentary, but true.
it is, and it's going to get worse with AI. And I remember a speech you gave at Hillsdale College a couple years ago, which I saw, and you talked about cableese,
Yes.
that language of we're communicating very nicely and politely because we know it's all bullshit. And so, really, there is no level of communication in your world, presuming you still dabble in it, or my world, the media, or the United States citizen or voter that isn't monitored. They're real, and now that everybody's given, we gave it all up. Sam, we gave it up. We gave them. We sure put my phone, give me a chip, track me, track my car, put something in my watch. That way you can tell my heart rate. What were we thinking? Are we that lazy? Are we that lazy that
Apparently, I tell you,
yeah,
one of the things that has driven me crazy for years is when somebody starts talking about your phone calls being monitored or whatever. I mean, obviously, we're talking about every form of communication being monitored. And
yes.
somebody responds, "I don't care if they listen to me. I've
Oh,
got nothing to hide." And it's like, to me, fingernails on a chalkboard, right? It's because, first of all, as an American, it ought to be bred into you that you are a free individual, and outside of very limited instances pursuant to the law, the government should get the hell out of your business. But also, more to the point, you don't get to decide what's wrong, man. Just because you're on the phone talking to your buddy and you think this is all kosher doesn't mean some guy listening to this on the other end has the same idea. I mean, you probably thought it was okay to organize a bunch of people to go stand outside an abortion clinic peacefully and
mm-hmm.
protest abortions and pass out pamphlets that were pro-life, again, peacefully, not impeding people. But we know now that law enforcement, up to and including the FBI, has targeted groups like that. Look, I've
Oh yeah.
been active at the local level over the last X number of years in Pennsylvania, back when the school boards were putting masks on everybody and do this.
Oh, I remember
You know,
that. Yeah.
we would be there. Okay, I remember, because somebody handed me the document, that before myself and a number of other individuals showed up at a particular school board meeting one evening, that morning, the school superintendent passed out to his staff a briefing sheet on myself and the individuals who would be there, uh, which
Wow.
described us as ultra-violent Christian nationalists,
Oh,
basically said we were a bunch of terrorists. We were the hole in the wall gang. Now, so there's myself. I've spent my entire life in federal service, working national security. My wife, the same, and everybody else there, probably somewhere between 55 and 65 years old. Two-thirds of them women and mothers and grandmothers. This was not Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid riding into it. We weren't
yeah.
shooting up the place. And yet these people were seriously briefing that we were domestic violent extremists. So, look at my Wikipedia page, which I
Oh
love,
yeah, I
by the way.
did.
Which I
I
love,
did.
by the way. I am a
I know.
conspiracy theorist. I'm a madman.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
This is a scary thing about the media, about this story that we're living in. I do believe we are so part of the Truman Show, and I wonder when. I'm sure. Did you see the movie? I'm sure you're
yeah,
familiar with the movie.
absolutely.
What a wonderful movie! I mean,
Yeah.
it was so ahead of its time. And when he was sailing away, and then he hit the wall, it was like, you mean this is fake? Yeah, the news is all fake. This is the hardest thing. Going back to what you said, and that I agree with you about the fingernails on a chalkboard. When, especially when someone who's intelligent says something like, "I have nothing to hide. Here, just take my phone. I have nothing to hide." The most intelligent people say that. I mean, political science teachers say that at universities. How ignorant do you have to be? Did they not read any Soviet history,
Yeah.
Chinese history, Middle Eastern history?
Yeah, one of the things that I do, because I'm a big believer, obviously, given my past, what I've done for a living, in keeping track of the opposition. So periodically, when I'm driving in the car, if I can stand the psychic pain, I'll put on something like MSNBC and listen to them for a while. And
Psychic pain.
yeah, I mean, you can only take so much of it before your brains begin to leak out your ears. But the thing is, it is literally like stepping through the door into an alternate universe. I mean, it is wow. And you just think for a second, the people that actually, this is their source of news, like they listen to these guys, CNN and the usual suspects, they're, they have no idea what's going on. I mean, they must be like people in North Korea, right? That still don't know the US landed on the moon and all.
Hmm.
They literally are in an alternate reality, and it's terrifying.
I think the what I learned over the years when I made the transition from music and entertainment, like 20 plus years ago, to talk and pursuing the truth and filling in for Rush and stuff like that, I realized that if you take the teleprompters down from every major network, these people would be lost.
Yes.
They would be lost. There's not a lot of original thought,
No.
and most of it's ideological.
Yes.
And if you went to any 6 o'clock news host today across the country, any anchor, your local anchor, said everything's down, you're going to have to wing it. You're going to have to wing it. You're going to have to talk about the Middle
Yeah.
East or the Revolutionary War with no notes. Just look at the camera. That would be it. That would be the end of their career. I don't think people realize how programmed they're actors. They're actors.
Yeah, and they also don't understand that when you boil this all down, you're down to a real handful of corporations that actually control all these outlets. I always use the analogy, you're going to drive cross country and you put AM radio on because you think you're listening to local news broadcasts. I'm going to find out what's going on in Iowa. And after a while, you're going to realize I'm hearing the exact same script, literally word for word. Even in some cases, obviously, it's not even being read locally, right? It's being
Hmm.
retransmitted. But one way or the other, what I'm really reading is what I'm hearing is something somebody wrote in New York. And
Yes.
it's being sent out to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stations. So it has nothing to do with Sioux Falls or Phoenix or Albuquerque or whatever.
It's
It's
just a story about global warming, and you insert your weather into it. Like the
exactly
fires, global
exactly
warming,
right.
the flood, global warming. And then go one step higher, and that's the government has connections, and
Yes.
they say, "Hey, if you want access, if you want an interview, we want you to present it this way." So then the New York Times gets to go to the White House, they have access, but don't ask this question and edit out that question.
Yeah,
And then
well,
that
look,
trickles down.
think about the 51 spies who lied letter, that
Oh,
absurd thing saying Hunter's laptop is,
yep.
I mean, when we boil out the legalese and the waffle wording nobody read, it says Hunter's laptop is not real, it's Russian disinformation. Okay, well, not only was that thing cooked up and a lie, but that it was all coordinated with the Washington Post before it was ever published. It's not like they wrote the letter and they just put it up on the internet and the Washington Post discovered it and it was a story. It's like, no, you the Washington Post reporters, in quotes, are as much part of the cabal that put this together as anybody else. So yeah, we're going to publish this story for a specific political purpose, and that's all agreed to in advance.
Well, I know we have to wrap up here. I want to ask you about Tammy Bruce and Judge Jeanine Pirro, just because they're from my world. They're from
Yep.
media. Well, Jeanine Pirro, I think, is a very sharp judge. I've interviewed her before. I think
Yeah.
she's the right person for the job. What do you think about, a lot of you get a lot of media people. Trump likes media people. He likes high profile people. He likes Q rating. Do you think that's a good move?
I think the proof is in the pudding, if you will. Right. I mean, and that's true of every one of these appointments. Right.
Hmm.
I mean, whether we're talking Pete Hegseth or anybody is like, okay, man, there is really serious work that needs to be done. The appointment provides the opportunity to do the serious work. In and of itself, it accomplishes nothing, virtually nothing. So now let's see what they do. And I am, um, I think when you and I were talking off air earlier, you used the word impatience at one point. I am impatient, and
Hmm.
MAGA is impatient, right?
Yes.
And they should be impatient because the reality is you have until the midterms in this current environment. Now, how the midterms turn out, we don't know, and we can hope it's positive. But the point is, as of the midterms, potentially the whole world turns. So what? We're 6 months in,
Yeah.
you know, you got 18 months at the outside, and you better move like hell. You got to really, really move. Back to CIA. CIA, and again, I'm using it only as an example. It is not an exception. Uh, you got to go way past where we are now. You got to go way past having two new guys sitting on the seventh floor of the headquarters building in Langley, looking
Hmm.
out the window. You got to take control of that organization. Right now, you do not have control of that organization.
I
Many of
mean,
the
and
people, many of the people in the top positions were brought there by John Brennan and our proteges of John Brennan's. So to that extent, that organization is still run by John Brennan.
and
That's the
then
brutal
two,
reality.
you look at what you and others in the organization learned. You learned and were trained to infiltrate governments. Why wouldn't you use that same skill set to protect your careers and your
They,
friends?
they will 100%. Judge Webster wrote a letter, right, sometime back. He happened to have been director of FBI and CIA. That was his claim to fame. He, at different points, had been head of those two organizations.
Yes.
Okay. And he was criticizing Trump, obviously. And all I was thinking was, I was in the agency when Webster was DCI, at Director of Central Intelligence. I He was never actually director of Central Intelligence. He might have been a nice fellow. I don't know. I was a junior guy. If I talked to him, it was like, "Hey, sir," or, whatever. Uh, he was never in charge of the organization. From the day he showed up to the day he left, not one single thing changed in that organization.
Wow.
People came in, smiled in his face, told him what they wanted him to hear. He was happy to drink coffee and meet with liaison services when they showed up. And the status quo continued. And they are experts at that. They will wall you off. You'll be irrelevant. And that is very much still the play.
Well, I'm glad we're more aware of it after today. I want to have you come back on. I hope you'll come
Okay.
back on. This would be great to have you, even as a regular. But Sam Faddis, thank you again. Thanks for the truth. Thanks for your service. And the battle rages on.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.